Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee, Thursday the 13th of February 2025. We'll start with any apologies.
Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Morgan McGeehan.
Thank you very much. I think everybody else is here. Any late items? Nope. Declarations of interest. Councillor Orson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just in relation to the second item, Chaddiston Park Road, as the ward councillor, I have received correspondence about it, but I'm able to approach the application with an open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Orson. Can I just say as well that I have as well, as being very close to the scheme itself. Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 16th of January 2025. I'm staring at Councillor Bolton. usually your bit, that is. So yes, so thank you very much. Any comments on that one? Councillor Kerr.
For the Thornhill Lodge one on Thornhill Road, it's resolved that the application be deferred to secure improvements to room layouts and to assess parking issues. And I'm just wondering whether it wasn't so much the layouts as the intensity of use. And I don't know whether room layouts and access to parking issues actually covers the feeling of intensity that we were talking about at the meeting.
I thought the room layouts was to get rid of some of the rooms which would do the intensification. Is that your showing?
Yes, Chair, and we'd also, we've engaged with the applicant and discussed the issue of overall number of people as well, Councillor Kerr, so it has been accommodated.
Thank you, I'm reassured.
Thanks, Lucy. Item 5, minutes of the meeting, the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. Thank you very much, noted. Appeal decisions, item 6. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few to report, just for your information. There are seven items in total, but they relate to 5 proposals, essentially. The first one, installation of freestanding telephone apparatus on East Street. You can see there on the screen. We refused a planning permission and advertisement consent for that. You can see it's got, on one side it's got a defibrillator, information pad and other things. On the other side, it's got an advertisement panel. That's the bit that requires the advertisement consent. So we refused permission and consent, and the inspector agreed with our concerns about impact on the pedestrian street scene, impact on views of heritage assets, namely the Grade 2 star listed St Peter's Church, which is a 12th century building, and he did quite a detailed analysis of the street and the context and the setting of those buildings, and so that was well received, Chair. On the same vein, second item at the junction of Morlidge and East Street, similar thing, freestanding telephone apparatus, as you can see from that direction, probably not so much of an issue, but from the looking east towards the cathedral, the inspector again felt there was impact. You could see it in the context of heritage assets, historic buildings, the locally listed White Horse pub, which is to the right of that photograph. So that was another well received dismissal, Chair. Third item on the list, 57 Birchover Way. That was for a fairly sizable side extension, which the inspector agreed with, is again atypical in that particular street scene, although in other parts of the city, that's not an unusual design, but we have to be mindful of context, as you know. And so in that particular street, the inspector agreed with us. He allowed the single-storey garden building, as you can see on that site plan down at the bottom of the garden. So dismissed the side 2-storey extension and allowed the single-storey rear garden building, which are not uncommon these days in rear gardens. Fourth item, another householder development, an extension raising the roof of this particular building, as you can see from the screen, enlarging its height and putting another window in that gable. And the inspector felt, again, shared our views, shared our concerns about the context. Everything around there is largely two and a half story, and this is extending it vertically in an unacceptable manner. And so, again, appeal dismissed, Chair. And the only other one, the final one, at the Pentagon, a sizable screen, advertisement screen. And whilst there are numerous adverts in that location, in and around the Pentagon, from that particular viewpoint, it is quite an uninterrupted view of the verdant character of the Pentagon Island there. And so, again, felt our concerns relating to visual amenity, as is one of the considerations for advertisement consents, shared our opinion about the impact on the visual quality of that part of the road junction, and so accordingly dismissed it, Chair. So a good old suite of results there, and quite pleasing. So we'll take any questions, of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions, committee? Got away with it. Well done. Item 7, Development Control Performance Quarter 3.
Thank you. Normal report in its normal format. One thing I will just update you on, which I mentioned in January, that the dates for the Royal Hill Farm public inquiry, which will be hosted in this chamber, confirmed as April the 15th kick-off to be sitting for 3 days, 15th, 16th and 17th of April. We had a conference with the inspector, an online conference with the planning inspector last Thursday. Also met the barrister for the appellant, who is Chris Young KC, leading planning barrister in this country, so he'll be appearing here if you're interested. Our barrister is Hugh Richards from the same chambers. He'll be providing the defence along with Councillor Holmes, so we'll keep you posted on that. We've got to get our proofs of evidence by the 15th of March. And so that's an update on that appeal, and we'll keep you posted. They have said to us already that they won't be going for an award of costs against unreasonable behaviour, so that's good, but we've just got to field the costs of the barrister in this case. So I'll keep you posted. We'll take any questions on the rest of the report as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. No questions? No questions. Item 8, Planning Enforcement Update. You again, Ian?
Thank you, Chair. You may remember that some time ago we used to have regular enforcement updates, and I know that various councillors, including Councillor Bolton, have been interested in how we perform with planning enforcement, what we do, who's involved, and so I've just put together a short report just saying what we do, what we're all about, what planning enforcement seeks to do, largely act in a proportionate and reasonable manner in order to get breaches of planning control resolved in the most cost-effective and timely way. My colleague Sarah Coleman's at the back of the room. She's just presently waving, so she's our enforcement officer. Does a very good job with our enforcement assistant Helen Lakin. As the report states, all the other officers in the team deal with breaches of planning condition, other parts of investigations as necessary. Andy Sherville, who puts TPOs together, also deals with infringements relating to trees, of which there are a number of infringements in and around the city when people are developing sites and need to protect root protection areas and the aerial components of trees. And so overall, we manage the enforcement function within our planning team, but rely upon, of course, members of the public giving us the right information at the right time, because, of course, if we get all the information at the front end of a complaint, photographs where possible, detailed information about the breach, and that's where you can help out with good information at the start of a process. It can kick the investigation off on the right foot, and we can deal with it promptly. It's where we're sort of digging around for information. Helen and Sarah and others are having to go out on site and do site visits that may not be necessary. So I'm happy to take any questions, and we'll also continue probably the next quarter with another update on numbers and other things that we're doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Any questions? Councillor Bolton, then Councillor Kerr.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Ian, for the report and the information it gives us. And yes, you're quite right. This is an important issue for all of us, really, because as you see from page 3, 4.10, if you look at the figures, clearly there's been quite an increase over recent years. And certainly from the casework I deal with, the issues that I need to report are in depth, and they are generally neighbour issues. But when I go to site, it is a lot of infringement, a lot of TPOs particularly, and also unauthorised buildings. So I know the time that Sarah and Helen have to put into this, and looking at the caseloads that, as I said earlier, 2024 was 264. It does seem to have increased over recent years, and only having 2 full-time officers. Obviously, I know they work effectively together, and Ian has his weekly meetings with the staff, but clearly they have got a lot of work on, and I thank them for the work they do. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, thank you for this report. I think it's going to be helpful also to share with members of the public who are inquiring about planning enforcement issues, because it's got quite a lot of useful background information in it. I've got 2 questions. One is, I'm not aware of a local enforcement plan, and if we, a shake of a head there that we don't have one, I just wondered what the advantages of having one would be and whether it's something we ought to be contemplating. And then the second question relates to paragraph 4.8, which is about cases that have gone to court. And are there times when we would get court costs awarded? And those are my 2 questions which I noted when reading the report. But as a further question, Ian, and maybe in the next report to this, I think your comments about how to be as helpful as possible, both as a member, the councillor, but also as a member of the public, to be able to assist the team, I think would be useful to include in this so that we can point our colleagues or inquirers towards that information.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I mean, we don't have a local enforcement plan. We've got a local plan moving forward. We're looking at submission of a draft plan in December is a date on the time horizon. I think an enforcement policy within that plan would be very useful in terms of what we will prioritise, and having a statement, a policy with some justification supporting it, saying what we do. I think that would be useful. In terms of 4.8, that case is ongoing. Excuse me. It's been a pretty tricky case, actually. And Sarah's been doing another witness statement this week for it. It's non-compliance with an enforcement notice. It's unfortunately a job that's taken lots of time. The person in question has been... there have been delays in doing things, in replying to correspondence, and this is often one of the problems, is you're chasing people to do things and then going out on site and to date things when things were completed or when they weren't completed. Works to address this enforcement notice were carried out and then they were removed. Parts of the unauthorised development have been completed, but there are other parts that still remain in breach. The person in question has also not attended court, claimed they're elsewhere, and so they were an issue with a court, and non-attendance at a case, and so there have been costs, and we will be seeking our costs in this case to cover the litigation team's time, Sarah's time, and other people's time who have been involved. So that's what we'll be attempting to do. But that's a formal enforcement action. The vast majority of complaints we try and deal with informally. That's that's what the government tell us to do. It's a proportionate way of doing it, and through negotiation you can generally sort out most things And, you know, the examples in 4.7 and 4.8 are, you know, the exception rather than the rule. So that's the way we try and do it. I mean, when I first started work at Derby City Council, you know, there was more of a, you know, a formal enforcement route. The officers at the time were, you know, that's the way they approached it, but it's clearly not the most cost-effective way of doing things. And as I say, going through the informal route and trying to secure things by negotiation is the best way of doing it. Thank you, Chair.
Just on that point, Chair, can I just ask whether costs are likely to be a gesture level, or whether they're likely to be what we ask for? Not particularly on this case, but in general.
Ian, should I come in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably better for me to answer. I mean, in terms of sort of costs, I mean, we normally seek costs in terms of prosecutions and litigation. Realistically, you never recover all your costs. I mean, officer time, the time that is taken on these matters, it usually significantly exceeds the costs that you get awarded on court, and it's also at the discretion of the magistrate or whichever court is there. But yes, we usually recover costs on prosecutions, but as I say, realistically they won't cover all our costs.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Ian. Item 9, application to be considered. I'll go to item 9.1, 21 Taverners Crescent, Littleover. Julia, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, just one slight update to the report to condition 3 on this application. It's recommended that the condition is expanded to limit use of the property to a children's care home for up to a maximum of 2 children and for no other use within Class C2. That's just to prevent any wider changes of use within that class that might cause issues in relation to parking and amenity. The application relates to number 21 Traverners Crescent, a modern detached 4-bedroom dwelling situated in the residential area of Littleover. The application seeks permission to use the property as a small-scale children's care home within a C2 use class. The proposal relates to the use of the building only, and no physical changes or extensions to the house are proposed. The property is served by an existing driveway providing off-street parking for 3 vehicles, together with an integral garage. To the rear of the house is a small private garden area. The property is situated on a residential estate which is predominantly comprised of similar-scale detached houses arranged around a circular loop. The application seeks permission to use the property as a care home for up to 2 children. The supporting information provided within the submission suggests that children would be aged between 8 and 18 years old. Children would be supported by appropriate adults who would provide 24-hour living care on a rota basis. In terms of staff numbers, the submitted information states that for the majority of the time, no more than 2 to 4 staff would be present at the property. However, there would be some fluctuations in staffing numbers to allow for shift changeovers and to cover breaks. On very rare occasions, additional staff may be required. A very maximum number of 7 members of staff has been provided within the submission. The proposals also give a breakdown of likely shift changeovers. Typically, day support workers would cover a shift from either 7:30 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. or 2:30 p.m. till 10:30 p.m. The nighttime shifts would typically be from 10:30 p.m. till 7:30 a.m. A manager or deputy manager would also be present at the property, typically from 9 to 5 during the day. Wider visits may also occur, for example, from education and healthcare professionals, but these would always be on an appointment basis to ensure that parking is available on site. As stated within the report, we've received 87 objections in relation to the proposed development. Since the report was published, 1 additional written representation has been received, which has been circulated to members in advance of the meeting. The contents of the objection letters are summarised within the report. However, they generally raise issues in respect of increased traffic, parking and highway safety, noise disturbance, impact on the character of the area, loss of privacy, security concerns, crime and antisocial behaviour issues. When considering the use, it has to be recognised that there has been a change in recent decades with a shift to providing care in the community, As a result, old-style larger institutions and care homes are being replaced with smaller residential units. Many of these small-scale children's care homes are being provided within residential areas as the use is residential and there is a need for children to grow up in a community. In terms of the principle of use in this location, there are no local plan policies which seek to direct care homes to certain areas of the city. The proposal before you would replace an existing C3 dwelling with an alternative form of residential use with an element of care in a residential area. The site is sustainably located with good access to key facilities and is therefore, in principle, an acceptable location for the siting of a small-scale children's care home. There are considered to be no overarching planning policy reasons to resist the principle of the use in this location. In general terms, the proposed care home is expected to function in a similar manner to a typical residential property. It would usually be occupied by between 4 to 6 people, with occupants sharing facilities and engaging in common activities in a household setting. As with any residential house, there may be some noise, especially when children use outdoor spaces, but this is not expected to be significant. This is not expected to significantly impact on neighbour amenity or significantly alter the overall character of the residential area. It should be recognised that the planning system seeks to manage the use of the land and the buildings only and cannot control the behaviour of individuals, including any children within the care home. Although the submission provides information on the nature and behavioural characteristics of the children who may reside in the property, from a planning standpoint, such details aren't relevant. The focus instead should be on the scale of the development and the number of children expected to occupy the home. In planning terms, the question to be addressed is whether the use of the house as a small-scale residential care home with a maximum of 2 children is compatible with the surrounding area, which in this case is predominantly residential in nature. As highlighted within the report, in general terms, it's considered that the vehicle movements, comings and goings associated with staff, visitors and 2 children are unlikely to be significantly different from those associated with a typical family dwelling of this size, which could possibly accommodate 2 adults, 2 to 3 children, including adult children who may themselves have their own vehicles. The Highway Authority concludes that the scheme would not result in unacceptable impacts on highway safety or create a severe impact on the surrounding road network. Additionally, any potential impact on neighbour amenity due to parking issues is unlikely to cause significant harm, given the level of off-street parking proposed and the existing conditions in the area. The overall intensity of the use can be controlled by conditions restricting the number of cared-for children to no more than 2. A management plan condition has also been recommended to control details and management processes to help reduce the likelihood of on-street parking. For example, appointments for visitors and measures to encourage staff to travel by alternative means of transport. The use of the premises as a children's care home only can be secured via condition to prevent any other uses within Class C2 from being implemented without planning permission. Overall, with the suggested conditions in place, the proposal is deemed to comply with relevant local and national planning policies as quoted in the report, and it is recommended that planning permission is granted. And you have, I think, 5 speakers on this application, Chair.
Thanks, Julia. I think we're down to 4, I think. I'm not sure. 4 or 5. We'll start with Councillor Hazelgrave. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Would you wish me to move from where I'm sitting?
You can stay there if you,
Thank you.
Project yourself. I'm sure
Yes.
we can all hear you. Thank you very much.
My apologies before the clock starts. My voice is a bit hoarse because I had a respiratory infection recently and I'm recovering from it. Thank you, Chair. Councillors, as corporate parents, will be aware through annual mandatory training on safeguarding that through no fault of their own, some of our children and young people are taken into the care of the council. This is a further trauma in what will have been a traumatic setting in their family home. We are all corporate parents, and that designation of corporate parents isn't something that can be taken off and on as a position as it suits. Just like parents can't become unparents and then become parents again as physical parents in a household. The council is a corporate parent. There is a collective responsibility for the council elected members, employees and partner agencies to provide the best possible care and safeguarding for looked after children. The council has a legal duty to ensure that there is sufficient accommodation to meet the needs of its looked after children. The reason for the application is to enable the council to manage and operate a property under the ownership of the council in partnership with an Ofsted registered service provider. The home will accommodate up to 2 young people at any time, aged 10 to 18 years of age. The homes will provide short to medium provision with a view to the young person transitioning to several options, including home, supported accommodation and residential settings. The provider will offer adequate staffing and professional support for these children to become independent so they can move on to independent living. Around 2 to 4 members of staff will be present at the property for the majority of the time. Health and educational professionals would be expected to visit the property. This could range from daily visits to bi-weekly visits, dependent upon the needs of the young people. Social workers would visit in accordance with the young person's care plan, and this could range from a weekly visit to a visit of every 6 weeks. There may also be an independent visitor that will visit the young person. Derby City Council will contractually ensure that the provider is fully aware of their obligations and will work closely with the local community to ensure the area upholds its reputation, is peaceful and safe. In terms of the home itself, this is a modern detached 4-bedroom dwelling. The site is within reasonable walking distance of existing services and facilities, including schools and public open spaces, as is well served by public transport. And I should make the point that if a child is taken into care and its education is disrupted, but by being placed in this provision, they could actually continue with their education safely, then I think that's an important point to be considered. No external changes to the house are proposed, and the application relates purely to the use of the building and land only. Councillor Gurmail, Mr. Gurmail is here to answer any questions with regarding issues on the objections that have been tabled. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Azargrave. Hope you get better soon as well. Mr. Wild, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to object to the planning application for turning number 21 Taverners Crescent into a residential children's home. This proposal will have a detrimental impact on the character of the area, its amenity and the well-being of all residents of Taverners Crescent and Pavilion Road. Taverners Crescent is a quiet residential road designed for private dwellings with no through traffic. This proposal to develop will have a significant disruption with 12 staff working across 3 shifts, which is unprecedented for a residential area. There are no other residences with 12 staff working 7 days a week and all the disruption and noise this entails. Council Policy GD5 states that planning permission will only be granted if it does not cause harm to local amenity, including traffic generation, access and parking. The development parking provisions are insufficient, with only 3 parking spaces available at the property, with potentially in excess of 6 vehicles during shift changeovers. This is before taking into consideration all of the additional professionals and visitors coming to the property. The response from the applicant states that the garage could be used to create a 4th parking space, an acknowledgement that 3 spaces is inadequate. The extra vehicles will cause access, parking and congestion issues and inconvenience residents. Our supplementary evidence shows this proposal clearly violates Policy GD5. Council Policy E24 states new developments will take full account of the need for community safety. Taverners Crescent and Pavilion Road both have vulnerable and elderly residents, many of whom live alone. Residents' research into similar developments for children with complex emotional and mental health needs has highlighted increases in antisocial behaviour, crime and disturbances associated with these homes. This proposal does not take into account current community safety. Policy GD5 addresses noise and light pollution, and together with H13, matters of privacy too. Number 21 is located in a densely housed area, the rear overlooked by many properties. Our research indicates the change of use from private house to institution will create an environment where residents feel uncomfortable, even unsafe, using their back gardens due to disturbance and noise. In conclusion, this development will negatively impact the character and amenity and safety of community. 87 residents have objected to this planning application. Our MP has objected. I urge the committee to review this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilde. Mr. Cumberledge, you have 3 minutes, sir.
It would be difficult to identify a more unsuitable location for a residential children's home than 21 Taverners Crescent. Slap bang in the middle of a quiet, community-minded estate with a particularly high density of housing, immediately bordered by 4 houses and one of a central island of 25 adjoining back-to-back properties where any noise disturbance will be felt far and wide. Having lived on this estate since its inception, I can attest to the low traffic environment and community spirit that has induced so many families to put down roots here. I worry that this oasis of calm and tranquility is about to be shattered. The residents' observance of restrictive covenants that preclude them from operating a business or erecting fences has preserved the area's open aspect and fostered a strong sense of community. However, the flip side of this is that residents are extremely vulnerable to trespass and antisocial behaviour. And there is a plethora of evidence of such behaviour provided by residents living in close proximity to similar children's homes in Derby, where management plans have been promised but not delivered upon, where mitigation and collaboration has been promised, but in reality, residents feel abandoned and victimised. The applicant claims, somewhat disingenuously I feel, that vehicle movements associated with the development would not be significantly different from those of a standard residential property. Well, if that is the case, there are no standard residential properties to be found on Taverners Crescent. And this is clearly evidenced by the findings of the Residents' Traffic Survey submitted to the committee. The applicant also seeks to suggest that parking would not be a significant problem. Well, parking on Taverners Crescent is already problematic. Factor in the requirement for a dropped curb, removing one of the few existing parking spaces, and add in the extra demand from external agency visitors and up to 7 staff who could be on site at any one time, parking would be a significant problem. Let's be absolutely clear, this is a commercial 24/7 operation that is being proposed, with all the comings and goings that entails, which in no way resembles a typical family home. I estimate that, measured as the crow flies, or more to the point as noise travels, there are around 75 houses within a 100-metre radius of Taverners Crescent, a quite extraordinarily high number. Rarely can a planning application have had greater potential to unleash so much disruption to so many by so few. This densely populated environment is not a sensible location in which to place children with complex emotional and mental health needs. It is the wrong house in the wrong location. This committee has a duty of amenity in respect of the residents, and I urge you to vote emphatically against this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Cumberledge. Mr. Shanker, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I'm here today to represent local residents who I strongly agree with, and we strongly oppose the planning application for 21 Taverners Crescent. While we recognise the need for appropriate accommodation for looked after young people, this location is entirely unsuitable and would have a significant negative impact on the community. Taverners Crescent is a densely packed residential estate, and number 21 is situated with an enclave of 25 closely spaced houses with small gardens. Noise from outdoor activities could directly impact several neighbouring properties, with potential disturbance reaching over 50 homes within a 75-metre radius. Pavilion Park is effectively a cul-de-sac with just one entry and exit point. The application states that up to 7 staff members could be present daily, with all employees required to hold full UK driving licence. It's totally reasonable to therefore assume most will drive, adding at least 14 extra vehicle movements per day, not counting visits from social workers, therapists, maintenance personnel and emergency services. The parking situation, as we've heard, is already challenging. I've been out to see it several times. The property only has 3 parking spaces and the garage is designated for bicycles, meaning no extra on-site parking. Shift changes between 2:30 and 3:30 will force cars onto the road, worsening that congestion. The UK Highway Code discourages parking near driveways, yet the area already struggles with on-street parking. Furthermore, paragraph 115 of the NPPF states that developments should be refused if they have an unacceptable impact on highway safety, a risk this proposal clearly presents. Of particular concern is the later shift change at 10:30. Currently, resident surveys shows that only 1 vehicle enters or leaves the estate during this time. The proposal would, as a minimum, quadruple that number, creating consistent nighttime noise and light pollution in a quiet residential area. Headlights, engine noise, slamming of car doors will disrupt the peace of this neighbourhood every single night. Residents were alarmed to see planning documents referencing preventing crime. This raises a serious question: why should crime prevention even be a concern? The introduction of a business that may require police presence fundamentally alters the character of this peaceful community. Residents have submitted 87 formal objections, and it's clear why this proposal will worsen congestion, increase pollution, create noise disturbance and bring unnecessary security concerns. For these reasons, I urge the Planning Authority to reject this application in the best interest of the local community. And I'll finish by saying this: if this property is unsuitable for a private operator, it's still unsuitable even if the council is the applicant.
Thank you, Mr Shanker. Julia and Andy, if you want to come on any of those points, please.
Just on a few of those points. Obviously, we've got no planning policies which seek to retain private dwellings in certain areas, and again, no policies which seek to direct care homes to certain areas of the city. We're just looking at, you know, the sustainability of the location in particular. Parking issues, obviously, Andy's here to answer some questions, but parking is considered to be sufficient, and we consider with management measures in place, so things like appointment systems for visitors and perhaps staggering shift changes, that kind of thing, we can ensure that we don't have numerous vehicles turning up at one time. Staffing levels, obviously the applicant has given us a bit of a worst case scenario, but in general terms, there's likely to be 2 to 4 staff on site at one time. So obviously 7 was a very much worst case scenario. Issues with light pollution, there's no additional lighting proposed. It's unlikely there'll be any additional overlooking. Obviously no alterations are proposed to the property. And there's no evidence to show that there'll be any additional trespassing or crime or antisocial behaviour issues. We've got no evidence to demonstrate that. So yeah, that's, I think, I don't know if there's anything additional that Andy wants to come back on in terms of sort of the highway safety side of things. So
thanks, Julie. Andy, is there anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to, I suppose, it's an issue we get with also HIMOs as well. So I thought it's an opportunity just to go through the NPPF and how, you know, we have to consider the advice that we give committee in terms of the transport aspects of that. So, look, existing parking problems, perceived linkages to highway safety are often reasons that these types of applications attract neighbourhood objections. It can be a logical argument, particularly whether existing parking problems, but it's one that isn't supported by planning policy. I can only advise the committee on the impact of this development proposal based on the criteria that's set out in the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, which are that safe and suitable access can be achieved for all users. Well, this application isn't applying for a new access onto the highway. so that doesn't isn't a consideration. Is the development in a sustainable location? Well, we've heard from a few speakers about its links to Little Over District Centre, schools, etc., which I think it'd be hard to argue that it isn't in a sustainable location. But I suppose more importantly, the NPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on the highway's grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, and that basically relates more to access than parking, or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. So to be clear, as I said, severe does not relate to parking, but the consequences of congestion as a result of traffic effects arising from the development, or that safe access can't be achieved. So really, I suppose the important point here is that this development isn't of a scale that the traffic generation would be considered material. I think to put that into context, the DFT and their transport assessment guidance used to use a benchmark of 32-way peak trips in the commuter hour. So it basically used to say if a development didn't generate, if it generated less than that, then it actually wouldn't need any assessment at all. So it's just to give you a benchmark of where we are and how this development sits, kind of within that assessment process. So the NPPF, further, it doesn't advocate minimum parking standards, and I think if this application was to sit in front of an inspector, and because of its scale, the inspectors like to suggest that the Highway Authority has other powers under the Traffic Management Act to deal with any parking problems, and that that's not a planning issue. I think going back to the Highway Code, I know that there's a reference made to that, and just to be clear, obviously the Highway Code isn't legislation. It's a mixture of guidance and rules, and legal must not, so that's based on the Road Traffic Act, where it says must not do something, and advisory should not rules for courteous users, and that's an important point there, is that anyone driving a car should be courteous and they've got to follow those rules. There's no specific rule on parking opposite or near driveways, and I think what we're referring to here is Rule 243, which says do not park opposite or within 10 metres of a junction. And I think that's an important point. No, we're not talking about junctions, we're talking about driveways. So I thought I'd just clear that up and just put it into the context really of how we have to look at it and the advice we give to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. Over to committee. Any questions? Councillor Bolton first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And can I say from the outset, just for housekeeping, I have received correspondence also about this application. I haven't responded because I wanted to keep an open mind whilst we're deliberating it this evening. I've listened, obviously, very carefully to the speakers this evening and the officers' comments, as well as reading the in-depth report that we have in our documents this evening. I understand where the residents are coming from. It's the unknown. It's worrying about their quality of lives. I understand all that. When I sit on this committee, I always think, well, what would I feel if I lived on that estate? And that's what I'm trying to portray this evening. However, if you read a lot of the comments on pages 3 and 4 that take in the papers we have received, they're not planning issues. And I think that, Chair, is where, as a planning committee, we have to think of the local and national policy that we have to follow. And I think, as the officers have outlined as well, a lot of the concerns from residents are not under the jurisdiction of us. But however, it's part of the management plan that, under condition 5 on page 13, is highlighted. And I think that's the crux of the matter, really. The management plan is the most important document, as far as I'm concerned, when we are discussing this application. And I think it needs to be strengthened. I'd like to see in the management plan respectful and connection with the neighbourhood so that they have a dialogue and the residents are involved in how this property, what's the word I'm looking for, evolves, shall I say. Also, there needs to be involvement of the local councillors. If there are any issues, then I feel the ward councillors ought to be involved and try and erase those issues. I think it's a great shame that people feel, just by reading this report, that there will be an increase in litter and antisocial behaviour, etc. And I understand those dilemmas, but I feel sorry. If a child in care read this document, then I'm sure they would be feeling quite upset by how people perceive them, in actual fact. The other issue that I want to air is that obviously whoever takes over this establishment will need to go through an Ofsted registration and have inspections. So clearly there is that regime that will be enforceable, and clearly we need to prove that whoever takes over the management of this site goes through the necessary Ofsted reporting and policies therein. And I think that's another point that we need to understand as well. As regards the Highway Authority, you'll see at the bottom of page 5, the Highway Authority have no objection, as we've heard from the officer. So clearly that will that is not a substantial meaningful refusal. I was concerned when one of the speakers mentioned the erection of a fence. I'm not sure about any fences in this report, and I wasn't sure why that was mentioned, so perhaps that can just be cleared up. But as regards the outline of the officer's comments, particularly on page 10, I mean, there's no evidence to suggest the proposal is likely to result in an increase in criminal activity or antisocial behaviour, as has been touched on already. And concerns have been raised regarding the installation of CCTV cameras and additional lighting. Again, I'm not sure that is going to happen in any case. So if we go to the conditions on page 13, condition 5 I'd like strengthened regarding the management plan, so that there is consultation and communication with the neighbourhood and ward councillors. And I feel as long as that is done in a professional manner, I would go along with the officer's recommendation. However, I would like the insertion that to grant planning permission for 12 months with the conditions as slightly amended by myself and be brought back to committee for further consideration. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Shall we do the committee first, Stephen, before you want to come in on that? I'm sure you want to come in on that. Councillor Bonser, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I would support that position in relation to putting a 12-month initial agreement in place, because I think we do need to recognise the potential impact on neighbours and amenity by putting it in as a temporary measure. It really does provide a stick, and a much needed stick, I think, in terms of the management of the facility. So I would support that. The other question that I've got, and I think I know the answer to it, but I'd welcome some advice from Mr. Teasdale, is around the mention of the restricted covenant and whether that has any impact. If you can give us some advice on that, Stephen, please.
I think in terms of the restrictive covenant, that is not a planning material matter for you to consider. That's a matter between the individuals. Just coming in on the temporary permission, I mean, normally the guidance is against imposing temporary permissions unless you've got a really good reason for imposing them. I mean, but that's for members to determine whether they consider they. I think in the case where I think it tends to be particularly difficult imposing where it's going to involve the applicant in a lot of changes to the property and a lot of expense. That's one of the main reasons why temporary permissions or the guidance is not to put them on. But in this case, I'm assuming that the property will not need a lot of changes to it. But it's for members to determine whether they think there are good enough reasons to impose it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Have you completed yours, Councillor Bonser? Sorry, Councillor Bolton, you want to come back in?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I meant to mention in my contribution that we have done this before, and I think it was the autumn of last year when we had an application exactly the same, obviously in a different ward. It was for Prince George, the Kingsway estate, where that was proposed as a children's home. So it's not something new. We have done it before, and hence me raising it this evening, Chair.
I think similarly in that case, they weren't actually going to do any changes to the property. I think it might have still been in use. It was actually already in existing use as that. So it wouldn't have had an impact on the applicant themselves. And I assume that is possibly the case tonight.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Like my colleagues, I think that the management plan is a really important part of the way a home like this would operate. It's something that as a committee we've only been encouraging fairly recently, and I've got one home in my ward which isn't a children's home but for adults with who need support. And the fact that we have now got a management plan which involves local people has made a big difference to the responsiveness of the operator. But it is something that's fairly new to us. We haven't got a set of management plans that have worked well in other parts of the city which we could offer to operators yet. And I therefore think that to help that learning process, to look at a 12-month period would be sensible as well. My other concerns are that I'm pleased to see mention of cycle parking, but to have, if you've got somebody who's coming to visit as a visitor to the home, as either a professional visitor or as a friend visiting, to only find the cycle parking inside a garage can be quite clunky, and it may discourage somebody from actually cycling rather than and leaving their car at home and reducing the impact on the community. So I think to have casual cycle parking, which can just be a single Sheffield hoop against close to the wall of the house or down the side of the house, something like that, or even something attached that you can lock to on the front wall of the house or the side of the house, I think would make a difference. So when the condition is fleshed out, I hope that can be borne in mind. Looking at the road, I'd be interested to know what the actual carriageway width is, because in the street view pictures that we've seen of the road, cars are parking two wheels on the pavement. And I suspect my memories of the estate when it was first built was that most properties had a driveway and grass at the front. And clearly over time, a lot of the challenge of parking on the road has resulted in more and more frontages being converted to additional parking, which restricts the amount of on-road parking that's available. And if we did a survey of the street to say what proportion, what number of cars can be parked on the street without obstructing a dropped curb, I think it's quite low. And you can't park you know, it's not comfortable parking, blocking someone's off-street parking. And therefore, the more that happens, the less flexibility we have for on-street parking, which is another reason for enabling people to visit the site without needing to bring their car with them. And I think we need to maximise that opportunity. My other observation of this site is that it's been significantly extended into the garden by previous occupiers. And that actually reduces the amount of play space available for young people. I don't think it's so small as to make it an issue here, but I think it's something that we need to be mindful of. There is public open space, amenity space within the estate, albeit again not very large areas, and there are larger public open spaces not that far away. There are parks available. So I feel it has the potential to be successful, but I think that there are points that we could do to make it more likely to be successful, which I've mentioned.
Thanks, Lucy. Any other contributions?
Chair, is there any information on the width of the carriageway?
Do you have any info on that, Andy?
Not off the top of my head. It looks to be about, it's either 4.8 or 5 metres, I would suggest.
Thank you. Any other, sorry, Councillor Rawson, I do apologise. I did say you, didn't I?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation and the information in the report. As members of the committee, we have to balance obviously the concerns of residents against planning law and what the law says about how we handle and consider each application on its merits. And I think, as has already been said, we do understand the natural concerns that residents will have when something like this is proposed. The fear of the unknown and potentially reporting of other examples, shall we say, of where things don't go as they should. But as members of the planning committee, we have to balance those two things. And I think it's fair to say there are some examples of very well-run children's homes in the city. And as we've said, that comes down to the management plan and making sure that that's really, really sound. And I welcome the strengthening of that that's been proposed by Councillor Bolton and others. So in balancing those two things, obviously the concerns of neighbours and the planning law, I think we would be on shaky ground to be able to refuse this application because as we've noted in other applications, the difference has been that they've been up and running, and that's actually provided evidence for us to base our decision on, rather than hypothetical situations which legally we can't consider as members of the planning committee. So I do actually support Councillor Bolton's suggestion in terms of putting a time limit on the application so that we can see how it operates, how the management plan works in practice. And Councillor Bolton's said that the local councillors are willing to be active in the participation and participating in that management plan to make sure that things do function smoothly. So I would support that proposal, that additional condition. And I think that's best way that we can go in order to make sure that we're following the law as we have to as members of the planning committee, but also in trying to reflect the concerns of residents and making sure that they're fully taken into account.
Thanks, Martin. Mr Teasdale just wants to come back in on the 12 months.
I just thought I'd check up on the guidance, into the current guidance in terms of conditions. So it says that circumstances where temporary permission may be appropriate include where a trial run is needed in order to assess the effect of the development on the area, or where it's expected that the planning circumstances will change in a particular way at the end of that trial period. So that would support your suggestion.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I actually just had a question for Gamal, just following Councillor Hesselgrave's offer. The ratio of 2 staff per child, is that a standard ratio? Is that higher than what it usually would be? I don't know. I mean, I've come across these homes before. To me, that seems quite a high ratio. Just wondering if you could shed any light on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gamal is the Director for Commissioning. Yes, just to confirm, that's normal standard practice in terms of Ofsted requirements. Generally speaking, there will be 2 members of staff on site. Sometimes it could be overnight as well in that sort of context. Per child.
Thanks, Gamal. Thank you. You happy with that, Martin? Ish. Councillor Kerr, yes.
I certainly wasn't expecting 2 adults for each child. I thought it was 2 adults for 2 children.
Just to clarify, in terms of 2 children being there, to clarify, there will be 2 members of staff in terms of that. The only occasions when there might be more members of staff is when the young person has particular needs. So just to clarify, it won't be 4 members of staff for 2 children. What we are very mindful of at Ofsted are this is a normal residential setting for a young person, so it wouldn't be healthy to have 4 members of staff overlooking 2 children.
Thank you. No other comments? Councillor Graves.
You kept looking, so I might as well contribute. I'm always concerned that the voice of the local residents are overlooked quite often in planning committee because you're all restricted to planning law, and I find that a little bit difficult to handle, particularly as a councillor. You know, you're here to listen to the concerns of the local residents. And I also find that's in conflict with being a corporate parent as well, in particular in situations like this. However, in my ward, we've had 4 children's homes, and I know that's not going to be part of planning regulations either. 3 of them had major problems. 2 of those 3 have calmed down, but 1 is still very significantly causing problems to the local residents. So on that basis, and the fact that we're restricted by planning regulations and the planning officers are already telling us that we've got to pass this because that's what they read into the planning legislation, I think the temporary order would be appropriate in this case to give some protection to the local residents.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor Prosser.
I mean, just adding to that, but there are many children's homes that operate without trouble, and that's fantastic, and we wish it well. There are others that do cause tremendous problems, and therefore the temporary is good. I've raised this before, I'm going to raise it again, though. In this case, there have been 87 objections. I'm not allowed to read a single one of those. And when it comes to objections, context is very important. So even though I have an officer's summary of the objections, I cannot read them. And that really upsets me because it really matters that I can read what the local residents are concerned about. I know that's not new planning law, but I will say it again, I'm not happy that I cannot read the objections at all. All right? But the temporary thing would suit me because a lot of these go fine, some of them are bad. It depends on the management plan, it depends on the operator. And it also depends upon the council acting upon issues. So that's what I would do.
Thank you. Yep, we will move to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Can I just say one more thing? It's about the planning there. If we are going to pass this, can we make sure they include a full drop curb? Because
it's in the conditions. It's in the conditions.
Yeah, as a condition.
Read your paperwork. It is part of the conditions, yes. Yeah. So, Councillor Bolton's recommendation, we move to the vote with the amendments as spoken of through the evening, yes. So that's the 12-month trial period, and also the management plan beefed up a little bit, if we can call it that. Yep. Is that okay? And cycling provision, yes. So, can I take all those in favour of the application, please, with the conditions attached?
Is that 9 in favour, Chair?
1, 2,
including yourself?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. 9 for. Any against? And 2 abstentions. So the application is passed for a trial period of 12 months. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your attendance. Yes, sorry.
Just it will be 12 months from its implementation, of course. Yeah.
So thank you very much for the attendance in the public gallery, and thank you for the speakers. Thank you, Councillor Shankert, and thank you, Councillor Hazelgrave. Thank you, Gamal. So we now move on to item 9.2, which is 147 Chaddesden Park Road in Chaddesden West Ward, and this is Rory. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this is 147 Chaddesden Park Road, a bungalow on the west side of the street with some frontage parking and an enclosed rear garden.
We'll just wait for the to die down. Can't remember what word I was going to use then.
Okay. Did you get the first bit?
Far away, Rory. No, start from the beginning, Rory, please.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. 147 Chaddesden Park Road, which is a bungalow on the west side of the street with some frontage parking and an enclosed rear garden. The site is around 50 metres north of a crossroads where several commercial land uses are clustered, forming a small de facto local centre. The site has been historically in domestic residential use. Recently, a mixed residential and childminding and nursery use was established. This application seeks permission to retain this use for a maximum of 20 children per day. 62 comments have been received and are summarised in your report, 19 in objection, 2 neutral and 41 supporting comments. Objections focus on parking and traffic issues, in particular inconsiderate and dangerous parking outside the site and on nearby streets, noise and activity and the potential for this to increase in warmer weather, a lack of need for the business because of the site's proximity to another nursery nearby, and the effects of competition between those two. Supporting comments, including from the Council's Childcare and Families team, focus on the quality of service provided by the business, the local need for it, and the local client base who value its services highly. No objection is raised by either the Highway Authority or the Council's Environmental Health team, subject to conditions, specifically the use of a noise management plan and a travel plan or travel statement to minimise the development's noise, traffic and parking impacts. Although it is a relatively intensive use of a small site with potential for noise disturbance, and there is some evidence of inconsiderate parking, officer and consultee opinion is that the planning conditions can be used to minimise these effects. The development will affect the amenity of the surrounding area, and its acceptability will depend to an extent on the management of the premises. For this reason, a temporary approval of 12 months is recommended. Again, in addition to this time limit, conditions are recommended on a travel plan or travel statement, noise management, bin storage and waste management, car and bike parking, and limits on opening hours and the number of children on site to those specified in the application. Our recommendation is to approve the application with the suggested conditions. I don't think you have any speakers.
Thanks, Rory. No speakers. Any comments from committee? Councillor Kerr.
The paragraph, oh, hang on. Let me find a paragraph number. Under 5.1, condition 2, it talks about there being 40 vehicle movements in the morning and evening, potentially. But this is for 20 children. It doesn't consider the staff. And potentially there might be more than one child per family. So I think it's, in terms of the traffic generation, I think we need to, it's quite a busy road anyway, but it need to consider the impact of the staff. I don't know how many staff there would be for 20 children, but I presume there might well be 4 or 5 because they're all little children. And the staff parking is going to be already cluttering up the nearby streets because there's only room for 3 on the front, and they may well not be all be walking. So there's not a really an expectation here that we, you know, I want to make sure that the travel plan actually considers the staff and not just the users of the facility. Does that make sense? Because they seem to have sort of been forgotten in that statement.
You got that one, Andy? I would have thought that would have been included in
yeah, I suppose I'll put some context in terms of the number of trips. We've got a database, so that's something that we use. It's an industry standard to look at the profile of trip generation of certain types of land uses. So there's quite a lot in there out in nurseries. So we've used that just to have a look based on the number of children. And it's sort of suggesting that obviously people drop their kids off from 7:30 to possibly 10 o'clock to go to work or go about their business. So it's spread over a period of time. It's not just all everyone arrives together. So the peak is between 8 and 9, and it estimates that that's 4 arrivals and 4 departures.
Thank you. Does that answer that, Lucy?
Well, sorry, Chair. It says there's a travel plan which is to be agreed and implemented, but the discussion in the report is mostly about the 20 children's being brought and fetched. And I just want to make sure that the staff and the impact of staff parking is also included. So in terms of putting together a travel plan. So it's just when the travel plan is being reviewed by officers, I don't want us to only think about the users, I want to think about staff.
Ian, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it will be, Councillor Kerr, and the supporting statement put forward that talks about how it's currently being run is that the operator is encouraging staff to use active travel. And so that'll be in the travel plan anyway, Councillor Kerr, just to reassure.
Thank you.
I was going to come in on that one as well. Yes, the supporting statement is pretty good because I think the lady's encouraging parents to walk if possible. And I know kids are going to be little and whatever, but and I think that's all part of it as well. So yeah. Councillor Ross.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is in my ward, so it's an area I know well. I think the first thing to say is that the provision of childcare locally is to be very much welcomed, particularly providing a choice for the parents. So it's been mentioned that there's a nursery just along on Chaddesden Park Road. This is a childminding business, so that provides a different type of setting that might be preferable for some parents, a more homely setting. So there is that difference, smaller numbers of children, etc. So I think, as I say, the principle of providing childcare locally within communities can be accessed by walking, which is to be encouraged, is welcome. This particular application, which we are here to consider tonight, Some of the objections seem to be mainly around parking and generation of traffic. Chaddesden Park Road is a busy road already, so the sort of vehicle movements that are mentioned in the report I think will be fairly easily accommodated. There are, as you can see from the map, a number of side streets that people will no doubt use. It'll be safer, to be honest. I don't always like getting out of the car on Chaddesden Park Road itself because it's such a busy road. So I think that will mitigate a dispersion of the users of the childcare facility to use the neighbouring streets. And again, it's not like a school in that there's a set start and a set closing time. So I think those journeys will be dispersed as parents collect children at different times of the day. So I think overall, in general, I think this is to be welcomed and will provide a positive contribution to the community. If we can encourage walking as much as possible, I'm sure that message has been given by the committee, and with the conditions that we've got, I think any potential problems can be mitigated through those conditions, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. Any other comments? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to support what Councillor Rawson has just said, and clearly I agree, it is a very busy road, Chaddesden Park Road, and cars do tend to, shall I say, slightly quicker on the roadway than they should do. But knowing it's the far end of Chaddesden Park Road, isn't it, near the Max Road end, so people will probably park in Spinney or Margreave, etc. And as Councillor Rawson has just outlined, this is slightly different with the childminding situation. There won't be determined times and departures. So I think the 12 months recommendation again is a sensible one. And clearly if it comes back to this committee, then we can review it then. But obviously we need more childminders so that people can go out to work. So I agree with the emphasis on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everybody. Would you want to move to the vote? Can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour of the application? Seven, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 for, any against, and 1 abstention. So that's passed. So congratulations. Thank you, everybody. We'll now move to item 9. Is it item 9? Item 9, application. No, I've done that. Item 10, potential future site visits. Over to you, Ian.
That's Infinity Park Way, Chair. If you want to go down there into Chaddesden, you can see it off the road and stand and look at the... And Osmaston Mill, Chair, currently under redevelopment and now for a 4-storey apartment block. I think you may have, you've been, Councillor Bolton, yeah.
Can I?
Chair, are they now demolishing this?
No.
Oh, good, because
They've converted it.
it says erection of a 4-storey apartment block.
Yeah.
But that's just the one to the rear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I went before, because it's a nice building.
It is, it's been converted.
Have there been a lot of changes to committee's membership since we went before?
Pass. Are you interested, folks? Anybody interested? No? Okay. I'll scratch those off then, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I've just got one late item, and that concerns the gentleman on my right, Mr. Woodhead, which I've only just found out that you have completed, Mr. Woodhead, 30 years at Derby City Council. So You must have started.
Yeah.
You
Sounded a bit happy there, Councillor Holmes.
You must have started when you were at least at primary school.
6. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So yes.
Thank you, Councillor.
So congratulations.
Thank
Ian.
you.
So, and for many more
commiserations,
years.
whatever. Yes.
And for many.
Thank
He
you,
doesn't
Councillor
look
Holmes.
old enough.
Hope you win that inquiry, Councillor Holmes.
He doesn't look old enough. So congratulations, Ian, and here's to many more years as well to come. So yes, so well, yeah, that's it. We're at this will be after the YouTube channel's gone off, I think. So yeah, so thank you everybody, and we'll see you next month. So thank you very much. Thank you. Bye bye.